First of all, the release by Al Jazeera, as it happens, of leaked documents showing the inside story of the Middle East negotiations. The so-called Palestine Papers, which showed the detailed compromises made by Palestinian negotiators to try to win a Palestinian state from the Israelis. The man leading the Palestinian team for the past 2 decades is Saeb Erekat, who reacted to the leak by denouncing it as a pack of lies. Well, I'm delighted now to say that Saeb Erekat is with us and joins us from Jericho. Saeb, welcome back. Obviously, this has been a very testing week for you in many ways. And do you feel, as we come to the end of the week, that the effect of these leaks and so on has been to improve your situation overall after 5 or 6 days, or has it been more favourable to Israel? Has it been bad news for you, this whole leak fuss, or has it now started to come round to your side?
Sir David, thank you for having me. No, I think last week we have witnessed the worst smear inciting campaign in the history of Arabs. I was portrayed by Al Jazeera in the music, in the sequencing, in the tampering, in the selectivity of things. And they were telling people Saeb Erekat is guilty, execute him, and give him unfair trial after that. The thing is, as far as the leak themselves, now we have an investigation committee, and you know me, Sir David, if these documents were read from my office, I and I alone will be fully responsible for this. From the documents, I'm looking at the Jazeera websites today. I'll give you 2 examples, sir, on what they did to me personally. In one statement, they said Saeb Erekat said to Americans, we killed Palestinians. And then they brought a show of a Palestinian being killed by Israelis. So that's the linkage. What was the sentence I was telling Senator Mitchell and, no, David Hale, Ambassador David Hale, look, David Hale, in pursuing the one authority, one gun, the rule of law, we have killed Palestinians, which is truth. 5 Palestinians were killed in Kalkila, 2 from the security the day before. And now your support of Netanyahu's policies of settlements, you're undermining Abu Mazen and Salam Fayyad and throwing the region to the hands of extremists and darkness. So everything was taken out of context. A second example I'll give you, Sir David.
Yep.
They quote me, just 1 second, they quote me as saying, I can be anything but not a Zionist, which is true. Now the context in the Jazeera documents, as it says there, that Tzivi Livni asked me to recognize Israel as a Jewish state, so I tell her I cannot accept Israel as a Jewish state, because if I do that, I'll become a Zionist. I may become anything except for being a Zionist.
Right.
So the whole thing, Sir David, was taken out of context. Now there are 2 other things I want to add. There is a document that they claim that I said that I will create for you the biggest Yerushalayim in Israel's history. Actually, it was Dr. Tal Becker who said that, and my name was put in his name. And thirdly, there is a document I see here which is absolutely unfounded, that I personally attack Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Egypt, and Qatar, and that's absolutely unfounded. I don't do that.
Right. What about Saeb, the 3 things that have been repeated most around the world, just to clear up these, the detail from the papers? Is it true that you, the Palestinian Authority, offered to Israel to keep most of their settlements, that Israel could, all but one or so, in occupied East Jerusalem, that did your team say that they could keep all but one of those in East Jerusalem?
Sir David, I am willing to offer you personally our official presentation papers to the Israelis and the Americans, which we also kept in the Arab League with our brothers in Qatar, Jordan, and Egypt. And yes, we were talking about East Jerusalem being the capital of Palestine, West Jerusalem being the capital of Israel. I've shown this map to Al Jazeera in Arabic in a special show. On 28th of January 2010, Walid Omar conducted an interview with me in which I showed Olmert's offer of 6.5, what they wanted to take out of Jerusalem. Unfortunately, Olmert's map were presented by Al Jazeera as my map. And then I showed him the map we offered. under no circumstances could we accept Ma'ali Adumin, for instance, or Har Huma, or other settlements. So the whole thing is, yes, were there settlements in East Jerusalem that we accepted to accommodate to Israel? Yes. Were they all settlements except for Har Huma? That's absolutely not true. And then they said that the trade-off is 1 to 50, 1 to 50. And then they said on refugees, we accepted 10,000 only. 10,000 was Olmert's offer, not our offer. Even the text of the email that Ziad Colt was sending to his friend Hala that alleged this doesn't have the number that they claimed Abu Mazen have said. So now, a week later, Netanyahu is off the hook. We're the bad guys. Now Netanyahu, who was isolated and was boycotted because of the settlement activities, and we have suspended negotiations with him for this. We were supposed to the Security Council and vote, and then we said if we do that, Al Jazeera will claim that we're trying to divert attention. And now we have the quartet meeting coming in Munich next week. I'm supposed to be writing letters to them. Unfortunately, I find myself having to be in many shows like yours, Sir David.
Right, and just two other quick quotations here. One was that you expect that only 10,000 out of 5 million refugees will get a right of return to their homelands. Did you expect that only 10,000 out of 5 million would get a right of return?
Sir, the leaks are on Al Jazeera and on English. I'm not validating their authenticity, but the ones I read, there is not a mention of a Palestinian number on the name of me or Abu Mazen. The number 10,000 came from Olmert. He said, I can accept 1,000 annually for 5 years and then 10 years for humanitarian reasons. Our argument is that we cannot make the decisions for refugees. They must choose either to return to 1948 areas, Israel, or the state of Palestine, remain where they are and get compensated. How can I put a number without doing this? So it's absolutely unfounded. And this is part of the smear campaign and the fragmentations and the tampering with the facts. And I don't know why. Why would they do this? They have these documents they claim for 6 months. Couldn't they ask me to come? I offered Al Jazeera to give them my official document. I brought the 1,800 documents with me to them to compare. I urged them to read it the way I said it. But I don't know why they're insisting on this. Now, do they want Hamas instead of us? I know there is a gentleman in Jerusalem named Rami Abdel Hadi who used to work for Prince Hassan of Jordan. He was against Jordan's disengagement, and yesterday he concludes in Al Jazeera that the Palestinian negotiator failed and we must found an Arab umbrella because he doesn't believe in a Palestine. So it depends on how people are using it. Some people here are saying Palestinian negotiators failed, Hamas must be taking over. I was negotiating in accordance with international law. We did not sign any agreement with Israel. I was so transparent in offering my leadership for studies in these negotiations, their summaries. I even presented them to Al Jazeera in January 28, 2010. I went to every single town, refugee camp, university. I went to the Arab League and submitted everything, and Al Jazeera made it. It is the first time I felt I'm being faced in the Inquisition courts. Sir David, that's the truth. They were going to refugee camps and telling them, Saeb Erekat dropped your rights of return. What do you do? Saeb Erekat sold Jerusalem. And why is this happening? How come I wasn't even consulted if they wanted to have true journalists and journalism? It could have been done the other way. But unfortunately for me, Palestinians are looking around. I'm inviting everyone to read the documents of Al Jazeera except for the two things that I mentioned. I cannot attack Qatar or Saudi Arabia or Jordan or Egypt. I know the consequences of Palestinians being there. So this is very, very low. This is very, very low.
So that,
and I never do that.
Right. So that, but I mean, why would the Palestinian Authority or Palestinians or Al Jazeera or anyone want to get at you in this way? Where do you think the leaks came from then? Where do you think the leaks came from?
Well, there is an investigation going on now. See, Sir David, through my work in the Negotiations Affairs Department, I'm not an expert on water. I'm not an expert in refugee. I'm not an expert in compensation. So I depended largely on Palestinians from London, from Harvard, from Buenos Aires, from Chile, from Paris, and so on. And I had 30 of them working for me as, very, very promising young Palestinians. Now, I don't want to say something to you that may cause me to go to a court. But all I'm saying, I requested from 4 governments, Canada, Britain, France, and the United States, to tell me what ways do we ask questions to these 4 individuals. There is an American person who used to work as the security and protection for the State Department. We have some people who are telling us and showing us that he was involved, and he works now for Jazeera English. There is an ex-British security intelligence officer, and there is a Palestinian lawyer who used to work for me. He's a French national. He works now for the Amiri Palace in Qatar. And there is a lady with Canadian passport. She's at Harvard now. We asked their countries, and by the way, none of them, all of them are innocent. I'm not accusing any of them. Please don't misunderstand me. We are pursuing an investigation. We want to ask them a few questions. So I asked their countries, what's the due process that we need them? And we requested them officially to come and appear in front of the investigation committee. But at the end of the day, if this investigation committee proves that these documents were leaked from my office, Sir David, I and I alone would be fully responsible. I know the pain I would have inflicted in my leadership and my people, and I will know exactly what this means.
What about some of the other things, and then we just move on, but for instance, there's stuff in these Palestine Papers that say here, for instance, about sealing up Gaza, that one of the passages records the PA asking for Israel to reseal the Gaza border with Egypt. Now, reseal the border with Egypt. Now, why would they want to do that?
It's absolutely unbelievable. Salam Fayyad has done nothing. I've seen this quoting Salam Fayyad on this. Salam Fayyad has used every influence, our Prime Minister Salam Fayyad, with the Americans, his good offices with the British, with the French, in order to make sure we spent 58% of our budget, Sir David, in Gaza. We're the ones who are financing Gaza. How can this be alleged? But this is part of the most vicious smear, insightful campaign in history of Arabs. Never since the Inquisition courts have there been an attempt to undermine us the way Al Jazeera and its researchers, in Arabic I mean, try to project us. I wish that they read the documents the way they are, because I see the documents in their website. I invite Palestinians to look at it. Please look at it and see how things were taken out of context. In every single instance, they quoted us.
And now you've been quoted as saying, not so much in the Palestine Papers now, but in all the coverage and so on, that you fear for your life now, after these revelations, more than ever. You fear for your life. Is that right?
That's correct, Sir David. I'm a father, have a wife, have 2 daughters and 2 sons. And the way Al Jazeera has reported, the way the music that came into things, and here we're a different culture. I think much of the courts have taken place in the streets of the Arab world, and many people were assassinated. So I think if people are telling your people, you are a traitor, you have sold Jerusalem, you have sold the refugee camps, and you have sold the refugees themselves, they're telling your people, Saeb Erekat is guilty, assassinate him, and after that, give him an unfair trial.
Are you going to continue as the chief negotiator? Do you feel that your position has been attacked by these revelations and these leaks and so on? But are you going to say, no, here I stay, I've been the chief negotiator, I will always be the chief negotiator, I'm not moving, I'm not going, I'm sticking here to continue the battle? Is that what you're saying?
Look, sir. No, sir. Look, sir. Sir David, I serve my people in this office. I have devoted everything I have to stand up to the Israelis for my rights to return Palestine to the geographic map. Now, I said to you, if the investigation committee that the Palestinian intelligence is carrying out now comes in its conclusions and say these documents were leaked from Saeb Erekat's office, I and I alone will take the responsibility for that. I know these leaks, if they're proven right, is a national security crime, is a lot to me in the future, and I will be responsible for it. So I don't think I will say I will be staying as chief negotiator forever, but I will not jump to conclusion as to tell you what I will say now. I will wait till I see the results of the investigation committee, and I stand tall and ready to bear the consequences. Because if it's proven once again that it's my office, I am fully responsible for that.
Thank you very much indeed. And as we look at the situation, we've talked about, and you've talked about, the fact that Al Jazeera, Arabic and so on were the messengers that sent these messages via these hundreds of documents into the public circulation. But we haven't got to any answer to the question we raised earlier on, but I just wanted to ask you this again, which was, who do you blame for releasing the documents? Who was it who gave them to Al Jazeera, for instance?
No. I'm not blaming Al Jazeera for releasing the documents.
Right.
I'm blaming Al Jazeera for not being accurate with the document, for tampering the documents, for being selective and fragmenting the documents, for quoting and misquoting, for fragmenting what I say in one sentence, for relinking. But no, journalists have the right to, if they can find documents, they have the right to release them. And I'm not blaming Al Jazeera for the leak. I'm blaming Al Jazeera for the style, for the fragmentations, for the half-truths, for the way they try to project it.
We're very grateful for you for being with us. We always have helpful and forthright discussions together, and we thank you once again for being with us at this rather tense time. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sir David. Thank you.
Right now, we welcome two very important figures in this story. First, I'm joined from Ramallah on the West Bank by Hanan Ashwawi, who is a former minister, of course, in the Palestinian Authority, and from Washington by Aaron David Miller, who has advised 6 US Secretaries of State on the Middle East. Hanan, let me come to you first of all. There was originally the Palestinian Authority dismissed all these leaks as a pack of lies, but now they do admit that parts of the material is true. What are your feelings about it?
Well, yes, in the larger scheme of things, leaks are important if they fall into the people's right to know, and if they expose what is essentially in a neutral way, what is essentially in the people's interest. What is happening is when leaks become a political weapon, with negative, with ill will, and with an attempt to steer them in a certain direction. They form a certain type of incitement or provocation, particularly if you focus on the wrong things, if you take things out of context, if you doctor a few words here and there. So in a sense, there's a difference between neutral leaks, where the documents are presented as they are, or when you have them as part of a PR campaign with very serious political objectives and implications, seeking to destabilize a system or seeking actually to put a certain spin on those leaks. And that's the difference between WikiLeaks and the so-called Palestine documents. I think the motivations are different. And of course, I think Al Jazeera Arabic, has done something which is quite suspect. But at the same time, I believe that some of the documents, yes, are true. Some of them are doctored. Some have been selected. Some are out of context.
In your case, Aaron, looking at this situation, were you surprised by what you read and what you heard, or was this what you expected? And do you find it constructive or destructive?
I mean, I think I'd make 3 points, David. Number one, this was clearly a willful, malicious effort by someone or somebodies to undermine the authority, credibility, and integrity of the Palestinian Authority and its negotiators. Second, there's no question, though, that many of the positions ascribed to Palestinian negotiators in these documents were, in fact, positions that Palestinians have taken over the course of the last decade, beginning with the failed July 2000 Camp David summit. But I have to say that in a negotiation, and this is, I think, critically important to understand, Palestinians and Israelis functioned according to the live and die principle that nothing is agreed until everything is agreed, which enables a negotiator to float all kinds of creative ideas without having them locked into concrete. Now, it requires a certain amount of discretion, but since there has been no agreement reached between Israelis and Palestinians in the last 10 years, anything that is put into the mouth of a Palestinian negotiator is merely a device. It's an instrument. And I think the Palestinian media and the publics don't appreciate that fact, but it's a very, very important point. Finally, one additional point is worth making. There's no question, and I don't want to overdo this because the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is not a morality play which pits the forces of goodness on one hand against the forces of darkness on the other. But there's no question, if you invited a man or a woman from Mars down to take a look at these documents, that alien being would reach three conclusions, looking at the period 2008 to 2009. Number one, the Palestinians were prepared to be quite flexible and come up with very creative and pragmatic fixes to some of these problems, like Jerusalem. The Israelis were largely silent, more questions than answers, and seemed reluctant to express their positions. And the Americans, in this case the Bush administration, Bush 43, really didn't know how to deal with the realities of the moment. So I think they're instructive as a window, but the reality is, David, that window has now changed. The Prime Minister of Israel is not Ehud Olmert, who was indicted. The lead Israeli negotiator is not Tzipi Livni, who is now in the opposition. And you have the Obama administration. And you have a peace process. Hanan may not agree, although I think she'll agree with the analysis. The prescription is another matter. You have a peace process that is in deep trouble. Weak leaders on each side, huge gaps between the parties, an administration that has stumbled over the course of the last 20 months, and a regional environment now with Egypt, which really is going to make progress on the Israeli-Palestinian issue if it needed any more difficulties, and it doesn't. Much harder.
Thank you very much. Coming back to you, Hanan, do you feel that the impact of these revelations and the impact of what's been said in them and so on has made a deal more difficult, more endangered, more damaged, or could things not have been any worse than they were a week ago anyway in terms of making peace?
Well, the irony is that right now everybody's talking about talks which are non-existent. The negotiations have stopped for a long time for a variety of reasons, many of which you can see in the documents. American lack of political will, American absolute bias to Israel, American lack of ability and utter helplessness when it comes to Israeli violations and Israeli policies, and of course putting pressure on the Palestinians rather than on the Israelis at all times, and demanding impossible concessions, and trying to manage a conflict rather than to solve it, and not presenting any position beyond a cover, legal, political, even in terms of public discourse for Israel. All these things have plagued the so-called peace process for a long time. And it's true, what Aaron said, America has been muddling through, but I don't think that's a prescription. I think that's a result of a seriously misguided foreign policy. As far as the Palestinians are concerned, this is going really to enhance and deepen the rift and increase the polarization on the ground between Hamas and Fatah and the nationalists, and therefore make it much more difficult to effect any kind of reconciliation that would empower the Palestinian political discourse and any kind of reconciliation or peacemaking. And of course, it exposes that Israel, no matter what concessions it demands, is going to ask for more and is not going to reciprocate in any way. And given the nature of this government, we certainly do not expect any progress whatsoever, because this is a government that's not committed to peace.
Thank you both very much indeed. We're unfortunately at the end of our time, but Hanan, we thank you very much indeed. Aaron, we thank you, both of you. And that, in fact, is all for this week. My thanks to all of my guests. Do join us here again in 7 days' time for another Frost Over the World.